as the Supreme Court prepares to hear arguments next week for and against the legalization of same-sex marriage, the public is increasingly coming down on the for side. In fact, an ABC News Washington Post poll released on March 18 found that 58% of Americans now favor the legalization of same-sex marriage, the number that leaped from just 37% in 2003. The shift in opinion is dramatic compared with other social issues. Public opinion on abortion, for example, has barely budged since the 1970s. Some of the change is likely the result of more advocacy and visibility by gay Americans. But marriage itself has changed, gradually toppling the gendered roles that once defined man and wife. News, facial hints sharpen people's gaydar now we're organized in a gender-neutral way, said Stephanie Coons, the director of the Research Council on Contemporary Families and author of the book Marriage, A History, Penguin Books, 2006. It's up to the individual couple to negotiate their roles and duties, Coons said. It's really easy for a heterosexual couple to say, that's what I've got, why shouldn't same-sex couples have it? I don't. 5 myths about marriage. Out-of-the-closet tolerance for gays and lesbians has gone up considerably. Some of this is generational, according to the Pew Research Center. 70% of the millennial generation born after 1980 supports legal same-sex marriage, compared with 49% of Gen Zers 1965 to 1980 and 38% of baby boomers 1946 to 1964. The silent generation 1928 to 1945 is least likely to support same-sex marriage, but only 31% in favor. Analysis: does a parent's gender impact a child's success? But support within each of those generational brackets has risen over the past decade, too. For example, in 2003, only 17% of the silent generation supported same-sex marriage. Visibility of gays and lesbians has made part of the difference. When Pew asked people who had changed their minds from anti-same-sex marriage to in favor white, they'd shifted their attitudes. The most common response, 32%, was that they knew someone who was gay and that personal relationship had altered their opinion. Republican Senator Rob Portman of Ohio recently made headlines for altering his opinion in just this way. The senator came out in support of same-sex marriage in an op-ed in the Columbus Dispatch on March 15, saying that he'd changed his mind after his college-age son came out as gay. Another 25% of Pew respondents simply said they'd grown more open or thought about it more, and 18% said legal same-sex marriage was just inevitable. Another 18% cited love, happiness, or the need for the government to stay out of relationship decisions. As opinions have shifted, so has marriage. Getting married once meant signing on to traditional gender roles wholesale. Companies once refused to consider married women for employment, or required women who were getting married to resign. IBM, for example, only altered this policy in 1951. It wasn't until the late 1970s that women could sue for consortium, or the right to their husband's aid, support and companionship. Before then, a man could sue a third party that injured his wife through medical malpractice, for example on the grounds that her injury took away his right to consortium. She couldn't provide him with services and companionship he had rights to. But because women were legally inferior to men, the wife could not sue on behalf of her husband. Changing marriage: it wasn't until the Supreme Court case Griswold v. Connecticut in 1965 that married couples won the right to contraception. Assisted reproduction, such as it was back then, was also frowned upon. 7 surprising facts about the pill. http://www.license.com/14691 surprising birth control pill facts.html. In the 1950s, at least 2 state courts held that assisted reproduction was adultery and the child was illegitimate, Coons said. Laws such as this gradually got overturned, Coons said, making marriages are less gendered. At the same time, expectations that a married couple must procreate have declined, and assisted reproductive technology is far more acceptable for couples who can't have kids the old-fashioned way. In other words, same-sex couples haven't changed marriage for straight people, as opponents of same-sex marriage often argued, Coons said. Heterosexuals changed marriage first. It's the opposite sequence than what is described by opponents of same-sex marriage, she said. Opponents of same-sex marriage tend to hold more traditional gendered views of marriage than supporters, Coons said. But given that heterosexuals aren't quizzed on their plans for splitting up the household chores or having babies before being handed a marriage license, it's hard to construct legal arguments around that view. It's harder for opponents to say every family has to have a guy who does this and a gal who does this, she said. The Supreme Court will hear oral arguments in the case Hollingsworth v. Perry on Tuesday, reviewing a federal appeals court decision that found Proposition 8, which banned same-sex marriage in California, unconstitutional. On Wednesday, the court will hear oral arguments in United States v. Windsor, a challenge against the Defense of Marriage Act (DOMA), which refuses federal benefits to same-sex couples in states where gay marriage is legal.